Hey, yo, what's the deal? It's your boy Tag from Pro Wrestling Tag. You know what I mean? As of this recording, it is 5:33 p.m. No, January 12th, 2026. But the upload time to this is 11:30 p.m. tonight. You know what I mean? I have not. So this, I did not know that Raw is on live in Germany right now as we speak. You know what I mean? And also, like, I'm actually cooking some food right now. You know what I mean? I'm cooking rice. I'm cooking some rice-a-roni for tomorrow. You know what I mean? I'm just waiting for this shit to evaporate everything and to melt so I could, so I could do it tomorrow with some chicken. Let me drink some water. Hold on. Not like the H2O. So I've not done this kind of video in a while. You know what I mean? Wrestlers ahead of their time. And I figured, let me pull one out because I'm looking at my list and I'm like, yo, how the fuck do I forget this guy who I'm about to mention? You know what I'm saying? Like, how in the world do I not mention wrestlers who was ahead of their time when this guy clearly was beyond ahead of his time? You know what I mean? Diamond Dallas Page. DDP was the shit in the 90s and in the early 2000s, right? DDP was that dude. DDP was a guy who, first and foremost, he's a Jersey guy. Now, shout out to all my people in Jersey. You know what I mean? I fuck with y'all heavy. I mean, y'all not better than us in New York. You know what I mean? Y'all the shadow of New York, but no disrespect. No disrespect. Y'all basically like, y'all relatives. You know what I mean? Like y'all, you could kind of see y'all cousins and such, but you guys are related to us. Metro North takes you to, Connecticut and to Jersey. You know what I mean? The path train and all that, but forget that. DDP. DDP was a guy who turned from a manager to a good pro wrestler. I mean, a great pro wrestler. You got people who kind of bloom in their career a little late and stuff. And that's not rare. It's really not rare. But I think with someone like him, to really get, wrestling down packed late is amazing. Like, he has an amazing story. Now, I mean, he clearly has an amazing story because I think before 94, 95, one of the two, he wasn't even wrestling. The dude was basically a fucking manager. Now, I mean, he was a fucking manager and stuff. You know what I mean? He would manage people and everything. But he wanted to try his luck in the ring. He wanted to transition, to being in the ring. And listen, the transformation that he had, the work ethic. Every time I think of DDP, I think of the work ethic. You know what I mean? Yeah, I'm watching the Parkers. They got they got fucking Gary Coleman in the Parkers and stuff. Let me tell you something about the Parkers. Like, Kim can get it. Kim Parker can get it. Her friends, what's his face? The one who was, the one who was fucking, what the fuck? Hold on. Yeah, sorry about that. I had a phone call. Now, I mean, Kim could get it. Now, I mean, her friend Stevie could get it. But believe it or not, we're talking about the early 2000s. Monique could get it. You know what I mean? But listen, going back to the thing. With DDP, he went to the power plant. This is a guy who was in his mid to late 30s, transitioned into wrestling. People were like, yo, you should consider getting into the ring. You know what I mean? So he went down to the power plant and, he worked his ass off to a point where, not only he got wrestling down packed, he got the mechanics down packed and everything to a point where he became world champion later on in the decade. Mike, this is a guy who, who entered wrestling in, again, I think between 93 and 95. Mind you, he was in his mid-30s. He was in his mid-fucking 30s getting into the ring. In his mid-30s beginning, to learn how to wrestle. And look what happened. He became hands down one of the best pro wrestlers of that fucking decade. Without a shadow of a doubt. You know what I mean? He beat, I think he beat Raven for the United States Championship. I'm not sure. But I know he definitely won the United States Championship. I think he won the TV Championship, but I remember him getting that United States Championship for sure. And of course, he beat Hulk Hogan for the WCW World Heavyweight Championship. Why? Because he worked his ass off. Age doesn't mean a fucking thing in pro wrestling. Look at Batista. I think Batista was also 35 at that time. I think Batista was 35 when he cut his teeth in OVW. My boy, he was 32. He was 32, right? I think Rico. Rico, I think was the one I'm thinking about. I think it's Rico. I think it's Rico. Rico actually was a late bloomer also, if I'm not mistaken. And he, like I said, he got it. He fucking got it. He fucking got it. And DDP was a great example of that. DDP was a perfect example of, what the fuck, yo? I'm just looking up something. So, yeah, what's his face? I think was 40. Yeah, Rico was 40 when he got to WWE. He was 40. You know what I mean? So, age doesn't mean nothing. But he made, DDP. Of course, could he have a better run in the WWF when he came in there? Yeah. I think the whole Undertaker shit kind of fucked up his momentum, and such. I mean, look, DDP meant well. I mean, look, he had ideas and everything. I think the Undertaker kind of took it, it kind of took it some way. I thought that feud would have been great. I mean, I think it would have been really good. But, ego came into power, and then this whole WWF versus WCW bullshit came into play, and, but, yeah, the Stalker thing was not him. I mean, it clearly was not him. But, again, DDP was one of those guys that, he was fucking great. He was terrific. It's fucked up that his career had to end the way it did. I mean, he made appearances in TNA and such, but he also made by far one of the greatest, one of the greatest finishes, period. That diamond cutter. I see Randy Orton do the RKO and everything. See, the diamond cutter was very similar to the stunner. You know what I mean? Oh, yeah, that's another thing I liked about DDP's character. He had that no-nonsense, character and such. Similar to Steve Austin. Similar. You know what I'm saying? So, yeah, I mean, DDP, and I think DDP is, I'm not going to say, he's nowhere near overrated. What? You got to be fucking kidding me. If you think DDP is overrated, suck these nuts. You know what I mean? If you think Diamond Dallas Page is an overrated wrestler, you bugging. Diamond Dallas Page can work in that character, the ethic, the work ethic and stuff, that could work in any fucking age period. That's why he was ahead of his time, because, he also, the thing with him too is he's also inspirational. You know what I mean? He's very inspirational. The DDP yoga, you know what I mean? Not only it saved lives, but also, it helped people in their careers. You know what I mean? Like, the man saved lives. The man saved lives. You know what I'm saying? The man, all the bada bing, bullshit that they had in this gimmick. That was a gimmick. That was a fucking gimmick. The man saved lives. You know what I mean? The man reminds me a lot of, it's going to be a crazy comparison, but just hear me out. All right? And I spelled this right. The man remind me, to me, the man is Pro wrestling's Richard Simmons. You know what I mean? Richard Simmons was a guy who, he motivated people to lose weight. You know what I mean? Like, he helped people. I used to be a fan. I'm going way back. You know what I mean? I used to be a fan of his infomercials and such. The man was a great motivator, right? DDP was like that. You know what I mean? And the man is still helping people with DDP yoga and everything else. You know what I mean? So, like I said, the diamond cutter was, that was one of the best moves you could ever possibly have, period. And it's funny too because Triple H, when he was Hunter Hearst Helmsley, that was his original move. And, DDP seen it and, he said, fuck, let me just ask him, if he could use another move because, like that's my finisher. And, Triple H said, no problem. And bam, he wound up using the pedigree and stuff. And of course, there's respect. There's definitely respect. But yeah, DDP, whenever I think of someone like DDP, I think of someone like LA Knight. You know what I mean? And there's nothing wrong with late bloomers. There really isn't. There isn't. You know what I mean? There really isn't because it's not about age. In pro wrestling, it's not about age. Paige Falkenberg proved that. He proved it's not about age. You know what I mean? It's about work ethic and what can you bring. And let me tell you something. As a wrestler, he fit at that time with WCW. He fit perfectly. Perfectly. You're talking about a homegrown star that WCW had. He became one out of nowhere. And look what happened. You know what I mean? The other thing I liked about DDP was the whole self-high five thing. He did that when he was a heel. You know what I mean? Like, he would come in the ring with a cigar. You know what I mean? Like, he would go, and extend his hand to somebody, and then he give himself a five. Like, that shit was clever. But yeah, DDP to me was definitely ahead of his time. Anyway, guys, I'm about to be out. You know what I mean? I definitely will be coming with a video tomorrow and stuff. You know what I mean? So I'm going to holler at y'all. Peace.